starting on Sunday, October 8, 1871, and burning for 2 days, the great city of Chicago suffered a devastating fire. The fire destroyed much of the downtown of the city, killing hundreds and leaving hundreds of thousands homeless. Over 17,000 buildings were destroyed. But Chicago was not a city easily defeated. Within days, the city began to rebuild. Not only rebuilding the burned-out core, but growing even bigger and better. Within 20 years, Chicago was ready to show itself off to the world. And just as Chicago always did, this show would be big. In 1893, Chicago hosted the Chicago World's Fair, also known as the World's Columbian Exposition. This World's Fair followed in the steps of previous World's Fairs, but the Chicago World's Fair would dwarf all others. The Chicago Fair covered a land area 7 times larger than the modern Disneyland park. The fair had a one-day record attendance equal to more than 7 Super Bowls, and one of the main buildings by itself could seat 4 whole Super Bowls at one time, all under one roof. The fair, and especially the Midway, was the inspiration for all amusement parks to follow. The Midway Ferris Wheel, the first of its kind, was so big it could seat 40 to 60 people per car and up to 2,000 people in one 20-minute ride. The World's Columbian Exposition would be the largest and most influential World's Fair in history. But it was all temporary, built to be torn down, lost to the world except for a few buildings, photographs, and memorabilia. Named after the Native American word for a type of wild garlic that grew in the area, Chicago was quickly recognized by the native and later European explorers as an important crossroads to the North American continent. Chicago naturally lies on a continental divide between the east-flowing Great Lakes and the west and south-flowing Mississippi watershed. This close proximity between east and west allowed water travelers a short portage between the Great Lakes to the east and the Great Plains to the west and the Gulf of Mexico to the south. By the turn of the 19th century, European settlement began to develop the Chicago area. By 1830, Chicago had a population of about 100 settlers and was first recognized as the location called Chicago. In 1833, the town of Chicago was incorporated and had a population of about 350 settlers. By 1840, Chicago had grown to 4,000 people. In 1848, the opening of the Illinois and Michigan Canal allowed shipping from the Great Lakes through Chicago to the Mississippi River and the Gulf of Mexico. The first rail lines to Chicago were completed shortly after that, and Chicago was on its way to becoming the transportation hub of the United States with its road, rail, water, and later air connections. By 1860, the city became the nation's transshipment and warehousing center. By the time of the 1871 Chicago fire, the city was the core of America, processing and shipping all forms of raw materials and goods to the rest of America and the world. The fire destroyed much of the downtown of the city, killing hundreds and leaving hundreds of thousands homeless. Over 17,000 buildings were destroyed. After the devastating fire, support and donations flowed into Chicago from donors far and wide, and the rebuilding began. Rebuilding began in earnest following new fire codes and building styles. Much of the fire debris was dumped into Lake Michigan, reshaping the original shoreline and allowing for train track and river flow modifications. Even as Chicago was in its first few years of rebuilding, people were already beginning to think about hosting a World's Fair. a fair to celebrate the 400-year anniversary of the voyage of Christopher Columbus and the officially recorded discovery of America by European explorers in 1492. By 1876, the first known recorded thoughts of an exposition in Chicago to celebrate the Columbus voyage was formulated by Dr. Charles Zaremba. Zaremba was inspired by his visit to the 1876 Centennial Fair in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, to celebrate the 100-year anniversary of the United States. Zaremba developed the idea of a Columbus celebration as he considered it an important event to the whole world and a good theme for a World's Fair. In 1885, Zaremba received a license from the state of Illinois to begin planning the fair. Other cities fought to host the fair, but Chicago finally won out because the leaders of Chicago raised more money and offered better facilities to host the fair. Chicago had more flat, easy-to-build-upon land and accommodations for visitors, including the Auditorium Building Hotel and Annex, and great transportation to and from Chicago and the fair. Once the final decisions were made, the building began in earnest on the site of Jackson Park and the area around it, including a stretch of land to be the Midway Plaisance, or the Amusement Midway. The World's Columbian Exposition would be the largest and most influential World's Fair in history. Much of the land upon which the fair was built was of poor quality. Many of the buildings were built on a foundation of wood pilings. Massive steel skeletons supported the structures along with wood framing that was then plastered with a cement mix called staff, similar to modern stucco. The buildings were not built to be permanent and would be torn down after the fair. Most of the buildings were designed in the neoclassical style, and the fair became known as the White City because so many of the buildings were painted white. The fair was very large and was built on a very tight schedule. It would have been difficult to complete the painting of the buildings using normal brush painting. New spray paint techniques were used to quickly paint the buildings. This was not the first use of spray paint, but possibly the largest scale project yet completed. The fair was also wired for electricity by the Westinghouse Electric Company, and both indoor and outdoor electric lighting was used, making the fair usable at night. Many local entrepreneurs took advantage of the World's Fair, providing lodging to fair visitors, often in cramped and expensive facilities. When completed, the fair covered almost 700 acres and featured nearly 200 buildings along with canals and lagoons. More than 46 countries, along with many U.S. states and territories, were represented. The fairgrounds were fully open to the public on May 1, 1893, but President Grover Cleveland had officially opened the fair months earlier. The fair immediately drew immense crowds. A single-day ticket cost 50 cents, or about $14 in today's money. The fair was originally closed on Sundays, but protests changed this policy so that working-class residents could attend the fair on their only day off each week. Upon entering the fair, attendees were met with wonderful views, including the Court of Honor, the Statue Republic, and the Midway. The fair contained a mind-boggling number of buildings, attractions, and exhibits. It is said that no one person could see them all. True to the intent of the fair, to celebrate Columbus's voyage, the fair included life-size recreations of Columbus's 3 ships, the Niña, Pinta, and Santa Maria. The ships were constructed in Spain and actually sailed to America for the fair. The first moving walkway or travelator was introduced at the fair on the Great Wharf. It was designed to move seated passengers or standing and walking passengers down the wharf to the casino. However, it is reported to have broken down early and was little used. Many attractions were exhibited in the various main buildings. The Manufactures and Liberal Arts Building was, at the time, the largest building ever built, enclosing over 30 acres of space and standing 200 feet high. It was estimated to seat as many as 300,000 people. The building housed all kinds of works related to manufactured goods, literature, art, music, and science. Inside stood the 70-ton Yerkes telescope, exhibits from a multitude of countries, and even the manuscript of President Lincoln's inaugural address. The Palace of Fine Arts housed over 8,000 works of art from all over the world, many priceless by today's standards. However, the displays were hastily assembled and displayed. Most people never saw a fraction of the works. The Palace of Fine Arts is one of only 2 buildings still standing today. The Electricity Building featured a dizzying array of examples and inventions. These included such things as various electric transformers, examples of electric transmission lines, various meters, searchlights, a seismograph now used in earthquake detection, chicken egg incubators, and an early fax machine-like device used for transmitting handwriting over electric wires. A number of the electrical devices displayed were by the famed inventor Nikola Tesla. Tesla worked for the Westinghouse Company, who won the contract to light the entire fair using Tesla's alternating current power. Inventor Thomas Edison displayed a version of his sound recording and playback phonograph, and there was even a sample electric kitchen of the future. The Woman's Building was designed by Sophia Hayden, an MIT graduate who, after this building, did not work again as an architect. The building displayed arts and crafts related mostly to the women's domestic roles at the time. The Machinery Building was a large building covering over 400,000 square feet and contained exhibits highlighting the advances in machinery. The Machinery Building contained a cotton gin, sewing and loom machines, and the world's largest conveyor belt, as well as many other types of machines. The Machinery Building also powered the entire fair with 43 steam engines and 127 dynamos generating electricity. It was reported that the Machinery Building, along with the Electricity Building, were less crowded than the other buildings, as it was so loud inside no one could stand to stay inside for very long. The Fisheries Building's 2 acres of exhibits featured floor-to-ceiling aquariums holding hundreds of species of fresh and saltwater wildlife, as well as all things fishing related. A number of other large buildings hosted displays as well. The Agricultural Building, the Mines and Mining Building, the Transportation Building. Other buildings also highlighted various industries. These included buildings such as a forestry building, a horticultural building, an anthropology building, and an administration building. The fair also hosted buildings and exhibits from 43 states and territories. Not all 50 states were in the Union at that time. The United States as a whole and 23 different countries. Each of these buildings displayed the items representing that state or country and were designed in a style of the state or country. The Montana Building even contained a statue made of silver. A German gunmaker displayed a coastal artillery gun that reportedly could fire a projectile up to 15 miles. Nicknamed the Thunderer, it was a preview of guns that would be used in World War I. A wide variety of other sights, sounds, exhibits, statues, art, waterways, boats, and other items were available for the visitors' enjoyment. The word Midway was coined at the Chicago Fair and is now the common name used for the location of sideshows and games at fairs. The Midway had a number of popular sites, and the money it collected was the reason the fair made a profit. The Midway was originally designed to show visitors the various cultures of the world in their more primitive form, and contrast that with the advances of the more civilized cultures shown at the fair. Instead, the Midway devolved into primarily an amusement and profit-making section of the fair. The first ever Ferris wheel stood on the Midway and was hugely popular. 50 cents got you 2 revolutions on the Ferris wheel. At over 250 feet high, it would be very large even by today's standards. It had 36 cars that could hold 40 to 50 people each. As many as 2,000 people in a single 20-minute ride. The name Ferris wheel became a new word in the English language, and the Ferris wheel would become the standard ride in amusement parks that followed. The Midway Street in Cairo was very popular and introduced America to belly dancing and the Snake Charmer's song. The Zoopraxographical Hall was a specially built building for displaying a simple motion picture device known as the Zoopraxiscope. Although more modern motion picture technology existed or was in development, the Zoopraxiscope was still most people's introduction to the idea of motion pictures. People paid to see projections of these short motion picture wheels, and that display was the first commercial movie theater. The famous inventor Thomas Edison was expected to display his kinetoscope movie machine at the fair, and it has been reported that the display existed. However, modern researchers have doubts that the kinetoscope was actually displayed at the fair. Early films by Edison and others did exist at the time of the fair, but few people had actually seen a true motion picture. The kinetoscope projected a continuous loop of 35mm film in an eyepiece through which the observer looked. The kinetoscope was an early user of the 35mm format that would become the standard film used in the motion picture industry for the century that followed, until digital movie making developed. Edison even attempted to synchronize sound with motion pictures. However, the technology simply had not been developed to automatically synchronize a film with a sound recording made during the filming of the motion picture. One attempt by Edison was discovered decades later and synchronized with modern technology, resulting in this short film. While the fair was a financial success, it ended on 2 tragic notes. The first tragedy was the cold storage building fire. The cold storage building was used to store fresh foods for the fair, as well as offer people a place to cool off and even ice skate. However, on Monday, July 10, 1893, a flaw in the construction allowed hot flue gases to ignite the temporary wood frame structure, and the building went up in flames. Many of the firefighters were trapped in the building tower and caught in the flames, resulting in the tragic death of at least 15 firefighters and others. Months later, on October 28, 1893, 2 days before the close of the fair, the popular mayor of Chicago, Carter Harrison, was assassinated in his home by Patrick Eugene Prendergast. Prendergast turned himself into the authorities, and he was found guilty of first-degree murder. After the fair ended, the White City and all the other buildings remained empty. The exhibitors removed their exhibits, and an empty city of steel, wood, and cement stucco was left behind, only a shell of its magnificent glory. Demolition of the fairgrounds began, and for a short period it was considered that some buildings should be rebuilt as permanent buildings. However, another tragedy occurred when fire struck and much of the remaining fair burned to the ground, preventing any possibility of saving those buildings. What remains today is a shadow of the fair in the landscape of Jackson Park and the Midway.